Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
In PR masterstroke, Arsenal bury bad club news by winning big game. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. Thankfully, we have a podcast coming out for you now. I have to apologize. I have the audacity to go away on holiday to see my family for my parents' 50th anniversary, by the way, in Florida. And as a result, I mustafied the shit out of scheduling the podcast. And so it is coming out a little late and without Paul. But Tim is here. You can find him on Twitter at Stoberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
And Clive is here. You can find him on Twitter at Clive PAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
I also have no return in my headphones, meaning I can't hear myself, which some of you might say is the platonic ideal of how the podcast would be, but you can fuck yourself. Hey, a couple of things I think we need to clean up here. We're going to talk about the big win over Chelsea. I do think we need to send out some kind of press release notifying the fans. I just want to let you guys know this. I don't know if you know, Olivier Giroud, Chelsea player. Just a heads up there. That's a Chelsea player. I think we should be clear on that. But yeah, obviously we love the handsome French bastard. When I say we, I mean you and not me. Any event, let's get started. So, Tim, I think the interesting thing for me with Unai Emery has been his ability to really set us up well for big games. And whatever we think of this guy and the job he's doing or not doing and the flaws he has or doesn't have, I have been mostly, not entirely, but mostly very impressed with what he's done strategically for big games. And I thought he got it exactly right this game. It looked like a diamond to me. I was sort of surprised that Torreira wasn't playing deepest, but that Xhaka was. But it was pretty clear quickly that he went back to something he seemed to want to do early in the season. Split the strikers, press with Ramsey, get the two wide, wide two in the diamond, pushing forward and choking off their build-up. He had Ramsey man mark Jorginho. I thought it was a masterstroke. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually what we did was slightly different in and out of possession. So when we had possession, it was much more of that box in midfield that I think Emery quite likes, the 2-2-2 almost. But then when we didn't have the ball, obviously Gendouzi and Torreira shuffled into those wide areas. And what we had actually in the kind of front 5 or 6, I'll do the arithmetic in a minute, but we had that. I've spoken about this a few times this season, like that V shape off the ball. So you had, Ramsey sitting on Jorginho, and then both of the centre backs are occupied by the centre forwards, and then both of the full backs, which is then the only other get out if you want to play out like Chelsea do under Sarri, were then covered by Torreira and Gendouzi, who are straight onto the full backs. So Chelsea, we just kept boxing them in. And actually what Chelsea probably would have been better off doing is starting with Olivier Giroud so they could go over the top of the press. But they didn't. They started Willian, Pedro and Hazard, who are all very similar types of player. Really, they're all good players, but they all do kind of the same thing, and they don't give you that direct option. Really, they're all dribblers. There's not apart from Pedro, and he caught us actually once just after we scored. Is the only one that really looks to go in behind, and there's certainly nothing doing kind of going over the top. So we kind of set a trap for them, and they didn't have a way out, and I thought that worked really well. It's hugely physically demanding, which is why obviously Emery has different plans for different games, but it's very physically demanding, particularly on because you're asking Lacazette and Aubameyang to play as centre forwards and not quite wingers, but cover those wide spaces. And same for Gendouzi and Torreira. And Torreira was on my side of the pitch in the stadium in the second half. And honestly, the last 20 minutes, he looked like. Have you ever done any long distance running and kind of thought, can I get away with crawling for the last mile? Will anyone have a go at me if I do that? That's kind of what Torreira was like in the last 15, 20 minutes. He was out
to
on
be
his
fair,
feet.
Tim, I hate to interrupt.
Fair enough.
But just to be fair, all you have to do to run is hold down right trigger. So, maybe he holding the controller wrong? Or you're talking about running in real life. My bad.
Yes,
okay, go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So, he tired very quickly, and actually I think if Chelsea had a striker worthy of the name, they might have given us a bit more trouble in that last 20 minutes. We looked quite leggy. But yeah, absolutely. In fact, to kind of build on your point there, one of the things a mate and I were saying on the way out was a bit like, can we have Emery manage us for these games and perhaps just have Arsene Wenger back for like
the minnows.
Huddersfield at home?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because I actually do think that, you could see why Emery won a bunch of Europa Leagues and why, he's been good in the big games. He does have a feel for really preparing us to nullify what the good teams do. The problem is nullification is a bad strategy against smaller teams, right? That's when you need to be the protagonist. And I'm not sure that he's as good against teams that aren't interested in playing the football. That we can get into that another day, because this is a day for praising him and the job he did. But Clive, I'll shift it over to you. And, I think that we have to, I think, just start with Ramsey and the energy and personality he brought to this game. I know that he is a player that you detest. I mean, that's probably not strong enough. I think loathe at the core of his being. But, despite that, I think you would have to acknowledge that, this game got started quickly, which is something that was nice to see. We haven't started games great. Obviously, we did in this one, and I think a lot of it was down to Ramsey's personality, his running, and his energy playing a role that at the beginning of the season he didn't look particularly capable of playing. Maybe he didn't understand it, but he certainly looked like he understood it against Chelsea.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best role for him. My issue has always been I don't think he suits playing in a double pivot. That's been my issue, and you can see what he can do when he's allowed to just run freely, feel the game, go and play to instructions, which he did really, really well. He cut off passing lanes really well, and I said before, I bet he wished he found his manager 2-3 years ago, who could deploy him properly in a role that suits his strengths. That role there is not a number 10 as in Mesut Ozil's number 10. I almost call it the highest number 8, specifically put in for a job against a team that has a distinctive pattern of play. And it comes back to one of our points we differ on, Elliot. You've been desperate to see what Emery's philosophy is. Well, and you actually quoted that we've all said, Sarri's got a philosophy. Well, his philosophy is so easy to read that team upon team can sit there and say, well, he plays a lot through Jorginho, he's misusing Kante, he's misusing Hazard. So what we'll do is we'll stop their build-up, we'll stop their top passer, we'll stand in his lanes, we'll put them under pressure. When they see the number one primary pass to option gone, they're going to hit it into our other midfield players that we've got in there, which are hard-working players. We'll get the ball high up and we'll put them under pressure. The whole game plan is around intensity, how long we can sustain it for, can we get a lead to dictate the story of the game. And the only reason you can do that is we've analysed them. Same as Spurs did, very similar game plan, 4 diamond 2, and any other top team will do exactly the same against them because they haven't got the flexibility of tactics to change, right? So, and he's sticking to his one philosophy, and I'm in no rush to see what Emery's philosophy is. I like the fact he's tactically flexible. The problem is, when he's tactically flexible and he gets it wrong, he's either seen to be too negative or not positive enough or not playing the right players. When he's tactically flexible and he gets it right, it's because of the very same set of players that are on the pitch that we debate about. Then he's seen to be a genius. And when it all comes down to it, all this does is dictates how shallow we are as football fans. And all that matters is winning. And when we win, everything is sunny. And when we don't, we're looking to show that we were either right or wrong about individuals, right or wrong about the manager, right or wrong about where we're going. I think a lot of this is due to our lack of maturity as a fan base, right? Are we really giving this club a chance to rebuild and restructure, or are we just taking it result to result, seeing how we feel, and then pouring scorn on whether it's good or praising whether it's bad? And I think this is something we got to really ask ourselves as a fan base. How prepared are we to really support this guy through a change, which is going to be incredibly difficult given all, the financial circumstances, the financial fair play circumstances, and the squad circumstances that we have to overcome over the next 2-3 transfer windows. I think therein lies a challenge for all of us, really, and we all waver on occasion. I think it's going to be fun to watch that going forward.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think the clearest point I can make here, Clive, building off what you've just said, is I am fully prepared to support Emery. All I ask is that he win every game. If he wins every game, I am fully prepared to support him. But to be fair, if he's going to drop points ever, I'm not going to be happy about that. I'm going to be really unhappy. So, that's sort of where I am analytically right now. Tim, I feel weird coming to this right off the top, but it happened early. I mean, Aubameyang gets a chance. Was it good defense? Was the ball slightly behind him? It looks like another miss. He obviously had a spectacular overhead kick that just whistles past the post that could have balanced it out. He winds up with 0.72 XG on the game, compared to Lacazette, who's the star of the game at 0.13, but it's the big misses. I mean, ironically, Laurent Koscielny shows up with a 0.97 XG, but that's another story. We'll get to that in a minute. I mean, as long as someone's scoring the goals and Aubameyang is getting a lot of chances, are you happy to say that playing both of them is working, and as long as he keeps getting chances, you're happy to see him starting? Or at some point, do you get concerned that the misses are a problem?
Before I answer that, I just want to make a really quick point on Ramsey, which is...
sure, yeah, I'm sorry. I should have given you a shout.
Yeah, no, that's fine. If you give him a job, he does it. I know he had, and I understand that he has this reputation of being a bit of a wanderer, but we've seen it a lot. If you give him a job to do, he does it. He does go to instruction, and he did this time. And I think there's something slightly different about playing the tip of a diamond compared to playing a number 10 role when you've got effectively wide forwards either side of you. So you're in a 3 behind a striker. I do think it's a bit different because you've got a bit more. First of all, it requires energy because you've got more ground to cover, and that suits him. But it also gives you more space, and it gives him space to run into, and that's all stuff he can do really, really well. On Aubameyang,
can I just ask you a question, then follow up on Ramsey, just
sure.
super quick.
Yeah.
Based on the character of that performance and some of his recent performances, are you happy to see, or would you be happy to see Emery continue to give Ramsey a run as a starter in the team for the balance of the season, even though he's off, just because he certainly seems like he's willing to put in a professional effort and can do a job that suits what Emery wants from that position?
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly if we're in this pattern of kind of freezing out Ozil, I kind of think we have to if we're going to do that. But yeah, so if there's a job that he can do, and I think there are a few jobs he can do, absolutely, I think he should play. And I think we're in that kind of short-term pattern now where we've got definite targets. There's no more League Cup. There's no more lower league sides in the FA Cup. There's no more rotated 11s now. Every game's a bit of a must-win game. So I absolutely.
Can I just come back in on that a little bit, Tim? Just because I totally agree with you about Ramsey being given a job, and this is the way that Emery's using him. Almost every time he's using him, he's giving him a job. It's either impact off the bench or a specific role from the start. And every time he goes on, he's not going on and wandering. He's going on to either disrupt or mark or drive, and he's been given a specific job. And this is why, I bet he wished he'd have met him 2-3 years ago, because too many times when he played for Arsene Wenger, he's allowed to go on the pitch and just play midfield, right? And I think that actually played to his weaknesses, which is wandering without structure and instruction. He wandered in this game, but he wandered right in Jorginho's pocket. Right, and everywhere he went, he wandered around him. And if you want to have a running race with anybody when it comes to endurance, well, good luck, because this guy can run all day. Do you see what I mean? But even then, he's been taking him off in games. Yeah. And isn't it strange, Tim? He's not been injured no more. With calf strains and things like that. And again, we overran him, overplayed him. He'd break down at critical moments. We lose him for 3 months. We take another month to get back to form. We was getting back to form. People like me will criticise him. Then suddenly he will get back on his game again. But you know what? It's about how you're managed and utilised. I don't think he's hardly had any strains this season. And he hasn't started masses of games, but he's played in a number of games. He's barely played 90 minutes. And he's probably quietly had one of his more effective seasons because he always looks fresh, he always looks energetic, and he's always got a job to do. And I think this is what you can do when someone's managed properly. And this is what I meant by I bet he wished he met Emery 2-3 years ago.
I think what we can agree is that by the end of this season, when he leaves on a free for Juventus, we will probably have figured out how to use him best. So that's good.
Exactly. And I'll start to like him then.
Yeah, there you go. Everything will be good in the world until it isn't. So, hey, Tim, I apologize. We've meandered. But yeah, on the point of the strikers, how do you feel about the partnership, even with Aubameyang missing chances?
Yeah, so I actually felt the first, the chance, because I mean the overhead kick was out of nothing. That early chance he missed, I actually thought that I can't remember, maybe it was Azpilicueta. I mean, that makes all the difference. That's one of those, just because he didn't take the ball, he absolutely, that's a tackle as far as I'm concerned, because he completely puts him off at the last moment. Takes his eye off it ever so slightly, and that's the difference there. So I don't think he genuinely scuffed it. I think he was made to. I'd count that almost like a block, to be honest. So I'm not as concerned about that one. But obviously, yes, there is a pattern about him, missing chances and whatever. I personally, I'm happy because he gets so many that he puts them away. And one of the things I was reflecting on after the game was, I tried to put this quite clumsily on Twitter about how, Arsenal tried for years and years, and boy, did they try to upgrade on Olivier Giroud, and boy, are Chelsea trying to upgrade on Olivier Giroud. And then finally, Arsenal have got two really, really good strikers who do quite different things and who work in tandem together. And I'm looking across at Chelsea at the moment, who are fielding Hazard as a false nine and trying to push Morata off a cliff somewhere and drive him off into the woods or something. And you look at Tottenham, who've got Son and Kane injured at the moment, and they're trying Llorente up front, and I'm thinking, how did this happen? All of a sudden, we're the team with the really, really good strikers.
Except everybody still loves Giroud more than both of them.
Exactly, yeah. That was the weird thing, that he was quite criticised. He was quite heavily maligned for the first few years. And
by who? I don't know what you're talking about.
and I think maybe slightly more than was necessary. And now that balance seems to have tipped in completely the opposite direction. But that was the thing I reflected on and found really funny. Just comparing us to some of our immediate rivals in the top six, and United are developing Rashford very nicely, but Lukaku's nowhere, Morata's nowhere, Kane and Son are injured, and I'm looking at us thinking, and Chelsea are playing Hazard, and I'm thinking we're the ones, after all these years of trying, of Sanogo and trying to get Barr on loan and Bentner, all of a sudden we're the one with these two brilliant strikers. And how do we show appreciation? We boo the substitution of one of them, which is a really Emirates way of showing appreciation, by the way. And I know, as people misunderstood me when I said this on Twitter, I know Lacazette wasn't being booed. I know the decision was being booed, but you know what I mean? That's,
of course.
That's a very Emirates Stadium way of saying.
The way you show your appreciation for the striker is booing the manager for taking him off instead of clapping the striker.
Exactly. And yet, Giroud. Yeah, and listen, I understand why Giroud's popular. Perhaps I don't understand why he's as popular as he is, but I understand why he's popular, and I was very happy to give him a round of applause when he did his kind of lap of honour at the end, and that's all fine. But I've got something in the works this week actually about the really weird politics that go behind leaving a club in the right way, because over the last few weeks we've had Nasri at West Ham booed by the away end at West Ham. We've had Giroud at Chelsea, had his name sung more than any Arsenal player, including Laurent Koscielny, who, by the way, has completed this wonderful comeback arc and put in a man of the match performance, and nobody seems to care. So we've and now we've got Ramsey, who has been quite a divisive character. Well, not a character, as a player. But he's heading into leaving in the right way territory, because he's going abroad, he's keeping his head down and keeping his mouth shut and not complaining, and because of the contract situation, there's a perception. And when I say perception, I don't mean this is an incorrect perception, but he's kind of not the victim, but he's the one who's being wronged. So Ramsey will walk out of Arsenal unless he does something really silly in the next few months. He'll walk out a bit of a hero. But then you look at someone like Bakary Sagna, who left in pretty much exactly the same circumstances, and people booed him when he came back.
Which is insane, by the way.
Yeah. I don't understand those people, and I hope never to have any kind of relationship with them.
Jesus. All right.
Because I don't know them. I don't want to know them. So sorry, that was a bit of a meander on another topic that was on my mind, but it's quite weird, isn't it? Like, there doesn't seem to be a consistent set of criteria for the right way to leave a club, because to kind of go to Chelsea, which I think most people understood for family reasons and stuff, and but to answer your question, I'm fine with Aubameyang missing chances, more so than I was with Giroud missing chances, because Aubameyang is 1 goal short of Giroud's best ever Premier League total. So there's your answer.
Well, and the great thing is he was converting about, I think, something like 60% of his big chances early in the season. On the last 13, I think last 10, he's converted like 13%. So what that tells you is, since this stuff does average out, I mean, strikers finish big chances at a pretty consistent rate between 40 and 60%. We should be due for a purple patch for him, which would come at a very nice period. The last, third or, fifth or quarter. What would you call it? Third? The last 2/5?
I guess, yeah.
2/5. Anyway, you get my point. I was told there'd be no maths. So in any event, well, Clive, staying with the striker theme, people were booing Lacazette getting taken off, but I actually thought he probably deserved to be taken off, only in the sense that, my God, he'd put in a hell of a shift. And I think what made Lacazette's performance so impressive, beyond the incredible touch to kill the ball, get past a man, and roof it with no backlift, which was extraordinary, was just the hustle and the tackling and the fight that he showed all game. And I thought his leadership in terms of tracking back and defending and committing to being everywhere on the pitch was, really something that was catching throughout the side. It was contagious. And you look at Aubameyang at one point, he made a tackle tracking back in the box that if Mustafi had made it, he would have given away a penalty. By the way, I don't mean to shit on Mustafi, but yeah, who am I kidding? Of course I do. So, I mean, as far as Lacazette's performance, how impressed were you with him, and in particular, just his energy to be committed? And here, let me give you some statistics to just sort of support this game. 61 defensive actions against Chelsea, tackles, interceptions, block passes, and fouls. The highest for Arsenal all season, 7th highest of any team this season. 33 tackles, the highest for any team in the Premier League this season. So, a lot of defensive actions, a lot of tackling, and I thought Lacazette was sort of spearheading that from the front.
Yeah, it just makes you wish that we could press like that all the time, doesn't it? And
yes.
I think we've linked it to big games, but I don't link it to big games. I just link it to, you could see even like the first minute or so, we're at it today, and it's like, maybe you have got a point, Elliot. I shouldn't dismiss it. We're at it today, so we're playing against somebody, and we're thinking, okay, it's going to be hard. We've got to up everything, and everybody was at it straight away from the start. Everybody was playing at a completely different level to West Ham. And I just think we need to flick that defensive, offensive performance. What I mean by that is just off the ball pressing and quick transitions. We need to have the same intensity when we have the ball. Don't fall into a false sense of security. Don't think, we have it. We have this, false domination. We just need to really penetrate and go through teams with the same ferocity. I think that's something that belongs to the manager's instructions, but also I think it belongs to the player's intent. And sometimes when you have the ball and teams drop into a low block, it does force you to look for those people who are going to be proactive. We've relied a lot on our fullbacks to do that, and what we haven't had in recent weeks has been 2 fullbacks that want to run through people. I think that maybe affected us at West Ham in particular. But the front 3 in particular, they were in the area where the game was won. They led by example, and that gave the sort of middle 3 in the V an opportunity to then protect the back line, get around Hazard. I mean, that's the key thing with Hazard. You've got to get around him with bodies, give him 2 or 3 to beat. If you don't do that, you're in trouble. And I can barely remember a quieter game for Hazard. And that's because the front 3 worked so hard. They restricted the quality of servicing. And then the middle 3 had a chance to go and double up and help defenders out when Chelsea dribblers started to dribble. And as Tim alluded to, the only time where I felt we were in concern was when Pedro ran in behind. We didn't get pressure on Luiz. He ran in behind, and that was a chance that they had, really, apart from set pieces, to really do something. So I thought, I looked at the collective and thought it was fantastic. With these 2 strikers, you do feel that 4-2 is the best way to go. I would have said before the season has started that Torreira at the base is the way to go, but actually the way we're using him, quite similar to Kante, but I think he's better on the ball than Kante, is quite useful, because that means that makes us more proactive and more engaging. It's amazing how Gendouzi seems to get in his team no matter what. Right, which is also a testament to him, his personality, and how he feels he belongs. Because whether you play him in a 2 or you play him left of a 3, I mean, he is probably, if you're looking at a Ramsey replacement, somebody with work rate, somebody who can go 2 ways, he's probably that player now, right? So if Ramsey goes, he's sort of showing he can play in a number of positions. Okay, he hasn't done the high 8 yet, or the 10 behind the 2, but he has a similar sort of running, similar sort of expression in his movements, and I just think he's, for 19, he's something else. So I looked at the collective, and you could see straight away, I don't know how it felt in the ground, Tim, you could see straight away from the screen that we're on this today, and the crowd, they feel it, we all feel it. And I just thought I know we've beaten some of these big teams at home, but I really thought we looked better than them.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Did. I really thought we looked better than them, and I think there's something happening with this sort of this 4-for-2 positions, and I don't think it's done. I really don't. It's going to be interesting to see who can manage the adversity at the end of the season the best. That's going to come up.
The irony, Clive, is that we had a manager who, when he kept bringing us to top 4, it was on the strength of beating the minnows and not always being competitive against the best teams. And the problem for Emery is it will be so much fun to support an Arsenal that wins big games, but if we can't get max points against the minnows, which is what all these other teams have been doing all season long, that's where top 4 is going to be lost, unfortunately. And, I think this is another example. Look, Sarri has a very, very clear way of playing, and I think Emery is very good at nullifying, like I said, and that's not meant to be a criticism of him. I just think, when you play a West Ham, what are you going to nullify? They want you to just come try to break them down, and they're going to try to find little openings here or there. And so I love a point you made. I wish our intensity on the ball against the minnows was as great as our intensity off the ball in these big games, because you're on the ball a lot more. And actually, Tim, one of the things that I thought was an interesting feature of this game is it reminded me a lot of the first game in some ways. Very open in the first half. We had some really good chances. Some we took, some we didn't. We had some open moments where they played right through us and could have created chances and missed the final ball or missed the chance. And then the second half, we just completely closed up shop. The difference is we did it with a 2-goal lead this time instead of trying to protect a draw. And I think we did it even better. And a big reason for that is Laurent Koscielny. I think there was a point this season where I looked at him and I thought, it might be over for him. And, I am not prone to making snap judgments about players, especially negative snap judgments. So I admit that I was maybe out of character there. But, it is really interesting. 42 clearances made by Arsenal in the match, highest total for us this season, 13 of them leading the team by Laurent Koscielny. I don't know that we always defended as well as the narrative suggests. I think that we were open at times, and they played through us at times, particularly in the first half. But that's when Koscielny and Socrates, but particularly Koscielny, were there to clean up. How impressed were you with his performance specifically as it relates to, on the whole, what was a coherent, to maybe that's not glowing enough, but I think that's fair, a coherent defensive display?
Yeah, it was incredibly impressive. And I think some of it is because of what was going on around him. Yeah. He didn't have to go herring into space too often. He had, because we had like Torreira and Gendouzi kind of protecting the fullbacks. I don't know if you read Lewis Ambrose's piece about the game on Arsblog, but he wrote it was very interesting about the tactical approach. But something I didn't really notice in the ground was that he was talking about how Bellerin really held back. And actually, Bellerin didn't go forward that much. He kind of stayed where he was and almost played like a bit of a playmaker, not least to try and get the ball down the sides a little bit of the pitch. And he kept playing, that ball not quite into the channel, but just like going on the outside. And, that basically there was a nice kind of compact structure around him. And so what did he have? Something like 13 clearances. So you kind of get the best of Laurent Koscielny that way, where you have like a proper defensive structure and he can just concentrate on being a defender and not being a firefighter, albeit down the years he's been quite a good firefighter. But I'm not sure if at this stage of his career and with the injury problem he's had, whether he can be that firefighter anymore. And I think I think Andrew on Arsblog compared it a bit to Per Mertesacker's performance in the FA Cup final. I thought that was a decent comparison, because that day Mertesacker did something quite similar. He had Holding next to him and he was like, right, you go and run about, you go and get involved with Diego Costa and you go and eyeball him. And, you get involved in all of that. I'm too fucking old to do that now. So I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to sweep up and you go after him. And if the ball goes in behind you, I'm here, kind of thing, that kind of senior partner. And I feel like Socrates and Koscielny did something a little bit similar. But also I don't feel like they were stressed because the structure around them was good. We had 4 hard-working midfielders who were coming back. Obviously, Chelsea didn't really have much of a striker on there. And so Koscielny, could, position himself to get rid of crosses and things like that and just do the sort of things that a 33-year-old who's played at the top level for a number of years can do. Just kind of knowing when and where the danger's going to be. And when it's not more than 5 yards away, that's fine. His positioning, a centre-back's positioning, particularly at that point of their career, is fine, 5 to 10 yards either side. The problem comes when the danger is 20 yards away from them and they have to go sprinting towards it. And we didn't make him do that. And what we got was a performance from a guy who's been a top level defender for close to a decade, and just having that sixth sense for danger. And I thought he was superb. And for me, this is one of the stories of the season, that this guy has been able to come back and put in a performance like that and get a very well-deserved goal as well.
Yeah, and I have to say, the irony, of course, is that early in his Arsenal career, he had the ability to give away a penalty, or get red carded. And, I look at Mustafi, and there's a part of me that says, as much as I want to write him off, if he could just take a page out of the development book of Koscielny, just a little more circumspect, a little more careful about staying on his feet and the way he, decides he needs to handle situations. There's a player in there, and it's so great to see Koscielny make this comeback and be, a man of the match candidate in a big game for Arsenal, captain of the club. And, we don't always get these good stories. And on the flip side of that coin, for every one in, we have one out. So, of course, we have to talk about Hector Bellerin. We're going to do that on the other side of the break. Clive, before we take the break, quickly, do you want to add anything on the partnership between Socrates and Koscielny and his performance?
Well, yeah, they're our best 2 defenders. That was as simple as that. And I think Tim's point is classic way of using the diamond. He didn't have to go dashing after the ball 15 yards in front, which means breaking the back line. And I think that was key to his composure and his reading of crosses, which I actually don't think is a strength of his. He is very good in duels, one-on-ones, but actually near post positioning, I've never felt that was one of his strengths. But because he wasn't so stressed in front, he was able to take that position up really well and really manage that well. And I was always hopefully would come back, because he is quite an athletic player, and medical science is getting better and better with these injuries these days. And if American footballers can come back from an injury, then an English footballer can come back quite easily. So, but pace is the issue, and we all saw in that video that the efforts they go in to make sure the pace is there. I still feel he's very much quick enough. But I think the formation takes the stress away, and that allows those two to work as a unit. And I won't go into the fullback piece just yet because I've got some thoughts around that.
Well,
but
we're going to get to it. Yep.
Yeah, I'll hold that back for now. But yeah, absolutely. I've always felt he's critical to our top four race, and maybe he came back a touch too soon. But from the Fulham home game, you start to see him come back, and since then, I think we got him back. So now it's about making sure we don't lose him again by overplaying him.
If we want to be fair to Emery, and I am loath to be fair to anybody ever, we went through really our worst period of this season at a time when the central defensive options were pretty thin, and the fullback options were pretty thin, and he was picking some pretty conservative sides, maybe to try to protect a very vulnerable back line, and maybe, just maybe, with a center back pairing that he can trust. Now, they can't play twice a week, but a center back pairing he can trust, maybe we will be able to see the best of Emery again, and an Emery that is a little more progressive. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. Quick question before the break for you, Clive. How is your relationship with your wife?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. She's still in the same house as me. So that's a start, right?
Okay. I would say, and I know you have kids, so I know you have been intimate with her before. I assume that was the last time. We can bring that back. Valentine's Day is around the corner. We're going to sell you some underwear. We're going to sell you some lingerie. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about Hector Bellerin. Stay with us. Okay, everyone, it's time to tell you about our friends at Enclosed Lingerie. You can find them online at The Enclosed, ENCLOSED.com. Enclosed Lingerie is a Lingerie of the Month club. That's right, just like a Beer of the Month club, only better, because it's a high-end luxury lingerie gift for you and your partner that's going to enhance the intimacy in your relationship. Right now, if you put in Arsenal at checkout, they're going to give you $35 off any gift from Enclosed Lingerie. So you're going to want to go to theenclosed.com and sign up now. Look, Valentine's Day is around the corner. What better way to celebrate the romance in your relationship than celebrating Valentine's Day with a gift from The Enclosed? And the gifts keep coming every month. So while it can be difficult to remember to keep the romance, to keep the intimacy in your relationship, The Enclosed has your back. Every month you're going to get that high-end luxury lingerie gift, and it's going to remind you of the importance of romance in your relationship. So do it now. Go to theenclosed.com. There is a perfect fit guarantee, so you never have to worry about the fit. It's beautiful high-end luxury lingerie. Just go to theenclosed.com and enter promo code ARSENAL for $35 off at checkout. Do it now. Okay, we're back. Now that we got you sorted for Valentine's Day, we have to talk some negatives briefly, and it is a sad thing to talk about. Before we get to Hector, there's another, I think, sort of sad note here. I just feel bad. So Tim, maybe you'll have a different read on this, but look, I know it's not going to be a popular opinion. I feel bad for Stan Kroenke because his NFL team finally gets into the Super Bowl, but he's going to be in Manchester for the City Arsenal game. So he's going to miss the Super Bowl, I assume. I mean, I don't know that. I assume he's going to go to the Arsenal, the big Arsenal game, and not be able to get back in time for the Super Bowl.
He'll probably end up sitting next to me in the away end again, like drunk and disorderly and swearing at the ref.
Yeah, well, to be fair, he's going to have that extra energy because of the Super Bowl that he'll be missing. So shame about that, but that's okay. And by the way, before anybody assumes that the fact that he's got a team in the Super Bowl means he's going to direct us in the right direction, they're not comparable. Don't worry about it. Okay, let's talk Hector Bellerin. Tim, I thought it was a great performance for him right up until his cruise ship went pop. It is a devastating injury for a player who is an even better man than he is a player, just a human being that you have to like, a person who is imbued with so much. Now, I mean, it is a terrible loss for Arsenal. I think Ainsley Maitland-Niles is the one who's probably going to be tasked with coming in and replacing him even more than Lichtsteiner, which is maybe unfair because I'm not convinced he's a fullback. His career is basically now reduced to whether he can thrive as a right back, and to be fair, that's the kind of break that unfortunately sometimes young players need to show they're good enough. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, where do you start with this Bellerin thing? I mean, in your opinion, is this a potential season breaker for us?
Yeah, it might be actually, just because, I mean, we're already playing catch up, right? And losing 3 players to serious injury is pretty unfortunate. But this has been pointed out by a lot of people. These are 3 players who really seem to fit what Emery wants to varying degrees. And Holding, I don't think anyone's saying Holding's like the new Bobby Moore or anything, but he just fitted what Emery wanted. He had the physical. He's one of the few defenders we have who has the physical profile to play the high line that we usually play with. He can pass out very well. He just, sometimes you need world-class players. Sometimes you need players that just fit what you want to do, and they will look a lot better for it. And Holding was like that. Ditto Welbeck, could play pretty much any position in any formation in that forward line that Emery wants him to. And yeah, this one's really, really tough because Bellerin, for a start, he's a superb player. He really, I think, has taken to what Emery wants in that kind of creative fullback role, and we're really beginning to see, where he kind of stagnated last season, which I don't really think was his fault. But we really started to see him dial it up again, and obviously on a human level, he's someone I've got a lot of time and a lot of affection for. As for how we replace him, I think it should be Ainsley Maitland-Niles. I think Lichtsteiner. I feel for Lichtsteiner because he's 35. He's come to a new league. He's playing right back one week, left back the next, right wing back, right centre back, alongside different defensive partners all the time. Like nobody looks good in that scenario. Nobody. So I feel like Lichtstein is getting a hard time for things that aren't really his fault. That said, I also think his signing is kind of what happens when you sign players before you appoint a manager. He's not an Emery fullback. And had Emery been here when that signing was signed off on, I'm not sure it would have happened. I think Lichtsteiner is not a bad player. It's just he's not nothing like Bellerin, and it just changes the way we play too much. I would give Maitland-Niles that chance. There is a lot of recent history, of fullbacks providing unlikely heroes in the Arsenal team and kind of weird story arcs. Going back to Ashley Cole and
we went to
Matthew
a Champions
Flamini.
League final with Abue. I mean,
exactly. Abue, Flamini, Andre Santos, Cole Jenkinson. It's been a very colourful position for Arsenal down the years, but Bellerin himself got his chance through happenstance, really. And I think Maitland-Niles, first of all, he has roughly the physical profile of Bellerin to do what he does. Secondly, the futures of Lichtsteiner and Jenkinson are decided. We will sell Jenkinson as soon as we can. Lichtsteiner's only got a 1-year contract. Maitland-Niles has been around the first team for a little while now as a squad player, but hasn't really had the chance to properly establish himself in the Arsenal squad. I don't think he's played enough in midfield yet for us to say, no, he's definitely a midfielder. I don't think, he went on loan to Ipswich and played on the right wing. He doesn't have many top class appearances in central midfield, and that still might be where he ends up, but I think for his sake, if he's looking to really nail down a place in this squad, he needs to jump on the train that's standing on the platform rather than waiting for another one. Because, like I said earlier, there's no more rotated sides anymore. He's not going to get games in central midfield this season unless there's an injury crisis, which could happen, of course. But there's a train on the platform now, and I think he needs to jump on it. And I think if he can do a decent job at right back for the next few months, his medium-term future will probably be secure. That doesn't mean he has to be a right back forever. They might reassess it in the summer, and they might say, well, do you know what? Maybe you'll be our James Milner. Maybe you can play in midfield sometimes, right back sometimes, left back sometimes, and you can be that player. Or, maybe you'll be Lauren. Maybe you'll be the midfielder that became a right back. I just think it opens up the world for him a little bit more than sitting there and waiting probably for the League Cup third round next season to play in central midfield again. And I think, Jenkinson, I suppose, can do that getting up and down thing, and he's not as bad a player as people say. But, his future's decided. He's 25, 26. I feel like this is quite a big opportunity for Maitland-Niles, and I think for the team, it just makes sense because it's the best approximation we've got of Bellerin, but it's not going to be perfect ultimately.
No, look, Bellerin had 7 passes to Lacazette alone in this game, 2 to Aubameyang. He had an assist. When Bellerin was out, we were so left-sided. We depended so much on Koscielny for everything, and he has a history of being in and out of the squad. Emery's teams attack using the wide spaces and the fullbacks, stroke wingbacks in particular, and their delivery into the box. And Bellerin has gotten, from a guy who couldn't cross to save his life to a guy who has a feel for changing angles, for cutting inside, for overlapping better with his midfield partners. I just think he's developed leaps and bounds in the attacking half. And he was a player who was a one-trick pony, and that trick was his pace. I think he's gotten a lot more clever about how he uses the ball. And so while we will miss him defensively, I think if we go back to being that very predictable left side bias, one way, one route to goal through Kolasinac, like that's going to be a problem. And so I do agree that it's got to be Maitland-Niles, and we're wish casting on him a little bit, but I agree physically he has some of the traits. Clive, I'm sure you're chomping at the bit to get in here. Your thoughts on Stan not being able to attend the Super Bowl? No, I'm kidding. Your thoughts on the Bellerin and potentially Maitland-Niles replacement situation?
I think, obviously we're all fans on here, Maitland-Niles, and we've been talking about him for quite a long time. And sometimes you get a chance in life; it's not ideal, and you can't always choose what you want to do, and you have to take it, right? And that's your foot in the door, and this is his foot in the door. I will say though that we have to be careful with him. We can't just think, wish him into that position and think he can play 3 times in 8 days. I think there are games coming up when we can do something else, right? So we've got Cardiff at home. Does he need to play that game? Right? Does he need to play that game before we go to Man City away? Right? So I would say we need his speed to Man City away, and we could play Lichtsteiner or we could play Mustafi at right back, and I'm not against that. And it's something that Tim mentioned earlier on about having a sort of a right-sided underlapper playmaker who can pass, but your left side rocks around, and that's the side you really drive on. And so what you do then, you end up with 3 defenders at the back all the time, shuffling across. You shuffle and you cover the left-hand side, and you overload on that side. And so there are options, and you have a much more of a static right side which sets the play or finishes off chances, right? So again, the picture changes when Mkhitaryan comes back. Who's going to combine with him? What type of combination will it be? Will they use Aubameyang on the right in the 3? And then you don't want anyone going past him. You just want someone setting the ball for him and giving him good service, right? So although Maitland-Niles if we had the European Cup final tomorrow, we'd probably pick him in that position. But there are plenty of games like, Huddersfield away. That's going to be a game where you need to be able to have somebody who can defend on the back post, who likes to go into contact, who's good in his box potentially, and when they put the ball in the air, to very strong strikers. And that could be a day for Lichtsteiner or Mustafi. So I would like to see that position rotated, just like if we're all honest and we think back to how Bellerin's been used over the last few years, we're all secretly thinking he's probably played more minutes than any other Arsenal player in the last 3 years. And I think, I'm not saying that's what happened here, but it's his first game back from an injury, a calf injury. So his body was telling him, this is a problem. You've got a problem coming up. None of us expected his knee to explode like it did. But it comes back to having a proper squad with proper players. So when you rotate them, you don't have to change how you play. I think what we've got to do, and I do think we have to do this, is that we have to buy a fullback in the summer, because we won't see the best of Bellerin until about this time next year. And that's a long time to wait. It's going to take 9 months to come back and 2-3 months to get back to any type of fitness or productivity. So don't underestimate what that's done to him. And we have to think about a true right back, which absolutely does what he does. Maitland-Niles, defensively, very strong, very good in stand-up tackles, uses the ball like a midfielder. He doesn't really run through lines proactively. So he's someone that can do the job, make us feel good. But the one that runs through lines...
Do you
like
think that's by instruction, though? Do you think there's part of that's just a manager worried about his maybe weakness in terms of his defensive discipline or reading of the game and restricts his running?
That's who he is, right? So when you're a midfielder, you go and get the ball. You say, "Give it to me here. I'm good on it. I can look after it. Don't worry. Just give it to me now. I'll take it standing here." That's a midfielder. That's someone who's been brought up with as a midfielder. They want the ball to his feet. Obviously, he can go after a ball. He can recover. He's very quick on recovery speed. But funny enough, Jenkinson's different profile. He wants the ball into space, and he sets off early, and he commits to his run. And he's probably, in a strange way, he's probably closer to Bellerin offensively than even Maitland-Niles is. But the combination of Maitland-Niles' one-on-one defending and his speed and his ability to beat his man off the dribble, which tells you, I'm a midfielder, I'm somebody who's played wide a lot. I can stop you and start you and take you and run past you and run away from you. Now, Jenkinson can't do that, right? He wants the ball into space, he wants to run onto it, he wants to whip the ball into the box. So I see a rotation in that position, and that's exactly what we should do. We have players who can play it, so rotate them depending on the opponent and go from there.
I'll stay with you just for a second. I want to just ask you sort of a weird question. You know, right now, Sarri is under a lot of pressure because he's using Jorginho deepest and Conte is more advanced, and people are saying it's a waste of Conte and they're not getting the best out of him. And, you know, if that's what he wanted Jorginho for, they should have sold Conte and so on and so forth. Ironically, Emery did something that I thought worked really well, but would have surprised us certainly at the beginning of the season, which is he played Xhaka deepest and deployed Torreira a little more advanced. How do you feel about that as sort of a going forward strategy of Xhaka sitting the deepest with Torreira being more advanced or out wide and not being the one to shield the back four?
Yeah, I think it's showing you what the attributes of that player is. I'm not, I think I'm not against what Chelsea are trying to do there with Jorginho. The problem that they have is everyone knows it's going to him. So what you need to do is create other passing lanes. So what we should be talking about a lot more is Kovacic, right, and what he's doing. And does Kante really want to come and get it? I don't think he does. Torreira doesn't mind coming to get it and moving it quickly. So then you need, I need Hazard to come in deeper because he's the pivot player up front. You're now losing his ability to come deeper and come and get the ball. So Chelsea need to create different lines of attack. And so what that's going to do then is free Jorginho. And sometimes they just need to go direct first to create the second ball space and take people away from Jorginho, and then he can play his game. What they're doing is just they're just allowing teams to get to them. They're keeping the ball in the wrong areas too long, and they are allowing us to read their game. Now, for Arsenal now, Xhaka, I'm a big fan of him, although I thought he was awful against West Ham, and I was wavering very much so, and I did see a limit to him in that game.
He had a mixed game against Chelsea, I thought, too. I mean, he could have picked up a couple of yellow cards. I think we got a little lucky with the leniency he was shown.
Yeah, maybe, and I think he had a quiet influence, and I think the role suits him. I think in the two, the role suits him with Torreira obviously masking his weaknesses, but the way they use those energetic eights, next to him, I like that. He's literally got three people just dashing around ahead of him in that diamond, really physical, and all he has to do is be available, receive it, step in when there's a bit of trauma, block off, create fouls, slow things down. But of course, when it comes to him, his biggest trick of all is his pacer pass, right? When he switches it out wide, either to forwards or to fullbacks, it gets there in like a millisecond, and then we can progress from there. And that's the key for us to getting us up the pitch in a really sharp and direct way, right? So I like him there. I like him in the two. I didn't like him at West Ham. That's all I'll say for now. Yeah,
okay, fair enough. Tim, let me ask you just generally, broadly, if we're not going to use Ozil, for me, I think that what we should do is pay me £350,000 a week because I'm happy to do the same job. But if we're not going to use Ozil, then I think you do have to point out the fact that creativity in the squad is maybe lacking in terms of players that really have that precision, that final ball in the final third. We have guys that are good getting it there, maybe not guys who are great once it is there. And for me, that raises the issue of what style best suits us. I thought we were great in this game in the first half, if a little open at times, but, we created our opportunities in transition through broken play by trying to win the ball back through pressure. I mean, if Ozil really is not going to be a regular part of the strategy, do you think that pressing and trying to create chances in transition is really our best form of attack, given just sort of the lack of final third passers we have?
For this type of game, yeah. I mean, actually, both of our goals came off set pieces, didn't they? Effectively, yeah. Yeah, and so you might point to that. I mean, not a concern because they still count from set pieces, but you know what I mean. Like when you score from set pieces, it's a little bit more. Yeah. You kind of question the creativity.
Yeah, you're
bit,
not
obviously.
building through the thirds of the pitch and finishing off a move. Yeah,
exactly. And obviously that Lacazette goal was so good that I think we kind of forget that it came from a corner because the way it came about, you expect like a header, don't you, or something, not for a guy to take 4 immaculate touches and wallop the ball in the top corner. So yeah, for games like this, I think for some games Ozil is what we need. I don't think he'd have been able to remotely do what we'd have wanted him to do in this game. But you look at like the Burnley game, for instance. Burnley at home, I thought he played really well. And you look at that pass he gave to Kolasinac. That's what we needed in that game because Burnley were playing with 8 or 9 men behind the ball, and we needed someone who could thread the eye of the needle. This game, not so much. Had it been 0-0 with 20 minutes to go, or had we been chasing the game, I'm certain Ozil would have come on. So I think for some of those games against the lower teams, particularly at home, I still think because you're not going to win transitions against those teams because they're giving the ball up. It's not a question because the answer is no, but I suppose the question is, does that represent value for the amount of money we're paying him? And it doesn't. But while we've got him, I think a lot of us have said for quite a long time we don't really want him in these games. But yeah, we maybe could have used him against West Ham last week.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's easy to say anything in hindsight, but I think it's pretty clear we needed something to, make that precise final ball against West Ham, and I think that has been a problem in general in the final third. How about you, Clive?
Well, I think I know what Tim's saying there, and I know we all want Ozil to play, but we want that Ozil to play. The one that plays those unforgettable games when we don't question his work rate, we don't question his running, we don't question anything because he plays football that's like on another planet. We just don't see it very often. So this is what the big debate is, right? Let's be honest, right? If we were to play Ozil in that position with Ramsey does really, really well, we may not get the same pressing, but we might get a lot more quality on the ball, right? So would that affect the team performance? We don't know. But we might also get a player that didn't create enough space for him to receive the ball, didn't work hard enough to separate from his marker to get the ball. And so we're now giving up the pressing, we're giving up quality. And so this is what a manager has to do. He has to manage the risk, right? He has to manage this and think, well, I'm not sure I can trust him. But what I do know is I know Ramsey's going to run around for me. He's going to do exactly what I ask him to do. And he may not have the sublime talent on the ball of a Mesut Ozil, but we've come away with a 2-0 win, and Ramsey's played for 60, 70 minutes and been pivotal in that role. Could we honestly say Ozil could do that? Yes, he can. Can we trust him to do it? No, we can't, right? So that's the problem. And if you lose trust with your coach, you're sitting there with a coat on, mate, and that's the way it goes. You're not getting off that bench. I don't think he's a good substitute. I think it's all beneath him. Tim, the bit where they come on the pitch at half time, they do little cones, and all the players run through those cones when they come back on. You'll see what one player jogs past it, didn't he? And it's Ozil, he jogs past it.
I wouldn't call it a jog. Have you seen that video on Twitter that always goes round of that steward doing a really pathetic job of searching people? Going into the turnstiles. That's kind of what Ozil does with the cones.
He just walks past it. I'm not doing that. That's beneath me. I don't need to speed up my feet, right? So we can just see what he's all about, right? He's a top player, but I'm afraid I'm not sure if he's willing to adapt what the team needs, and and that's it for me. And for me, if you got to be a team player. I don't care what you got.
Let's So sorry, I finished thought. I was just gonna say I don't think we need to go too deep on the Ozil situation right now, just because he didn't play, we won, the team got what it needed. I think everybody knows we've got a very talented player that we need to find a way to get something out of, and at the moment the manager doesn't trust that he can. Well, Clive, let me stay with you just for a quick final thought about the game. Just the way we've handled the second half, that felt really nice to me. Just a comfortable, professional closing out of the game. Any problems with you for a little passivity in the second half? You like the way we just held them at arm's length? How do you feel about that performance? Sort of closing out the game.
We left one goal on the pitch, didn't we? The Bellerin slightly delayed cross that was looking for a nice little side foot in the middle of the box. But apart from that, we just held the game really, really well. And against a Chelsea team that had a lot to play for. Right? They had a lot to play for. It was a massive game for them. They're now in a dogfight with us and Manchester United, and Spurs got really lucky on the weekend, so we didn't quite get that. But they're going to come back to us shortly. He said, hopefully. So I thought we handled it really, really well. I don't see any issues with it. I thought the substitutions were good. We obviously very unlucky with the injury, and that's a major blow. We just can't get 3 points sometimes without losing somebody for a year. It's unbelievable. We're talking about other players getting hamstrings. Well, how I wish Hector Bellerin had a hamstring right now. Because he'll be back in a month, and we progress, and I do think it's really going to be a problem for us going forward. I just don't see us sustaining the heights we need to sustain, so we're going to have to really work that position well. But yeah, I'm fine with Elliot, absolutely fine. I'm a pragmatist by nature, right? So closing games out like that is perfect for me, and the fact we had a clean sheet and we looked determined to get one, which means we show both sides of our face, right? We show the offensive side, the aggressive side, the chance creation side, and then we sit there and say, you know what, we're comfortable holding out to this without conceding, and that's not been an Arsenal team this season. So if you look at it from a overall game perspective, from a coach's perspective, he might say that's probably his best game of the season, because we got 2 goals against the top side, and then we've shown the other side and defended really, really well. So I think it's top stuff, mate, top stuff.
Yeah, my face is always showing the offensive side. So, all right, look, huge 3 points, big win, hooray. Before we say goodbye, I mean, Tim, I joked at the beginning of the podcast that it was a brilliant PR exercise from Arsenal to win a big game to bury bad news, but that is in fact what they did. And it depends on your take on the bad news. Now, the club is definitely doing some briefing, because the Sven Mislintat was, coasting and, riding other people's coattails and resting on his laurels. Stories have come out with a vengeance this week, but it was announced that he's leaving. We did an entire Sven Apocalypse pod that's on Patreon. You can go there and listen to it now, but first listen to the rest of this, then go listen to it. Any sort of final thoughts on what does appear to be a bit of a debacle with Sven coming in and not even lasting a year, or lasting about a year, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, so part of me kind of thinks that this is just natural when you lose such a big figure like Arsene Wenger. Like, getting it right straight away is not easy. And a lot of people were kind of saying, oh, we'll learn from Manchester United's mistakes and all of that. But Manchester United didn't think they'd made mistakes when they made them. And it wasn't just David Moyes. They brought loads of people in, and they brought like Phil Neville and Ryan Giggs into the coaching staff. And this was going to be like the brave new face, but with the guys who can transition from the Ferguson era, from the people who knew him best and all of that. And maybe Moyes wasn't, but the rest of it on paper looked okay. Like, very few people were saying, like, the week after Ferguson retired, oh, this is all going to go tits up. It's just the reality is it's really, really difficult. And but one thing, I was on the Arsecast about this last summer when the Gazidis rumours first came up, and I said that one of my worries was, I had 2 kind of worries about this. First of all, that with Gazidis going, there's a big power vacuum, and we've just hired some really ambitious guys who really like getting their face in the papers, which, again, I've said this before, I'm not saying as a criticism, but Sven Mislintat has this reputation for unearthing talent because he wants that to be out there, which is absolutely his right, and he's doing good work, so why not? But generally, scouts are like the invisible people at the club. And I had a little bit of a reservation that have we just hired loads of really ambitious people who are looking to jump into a grave here? And I kind of think that's probably what's happened here. But also, I did a little thread about this morning on Twitter. There was a brilliant article about 2.5 years ago from Rory Smith. And he was talking about when Steve Walsh went to Leicester. And he was talking about Monchi and stuff, and this whole like guru thinking, he described it as, and this idea that this guy here, he's cracked the transfer market. He's got it locked down. Get him, and we'll crack the transfer market. And it doesn't always work like that, because there's lots of hits and misses in transfers, but also usually like someone like Sven Mislintat, it's not him on his own going out and watching Dembele and Mkhitaryan and these fairly obscure players. He has a whole network of scouts around him to help him do that. And unless you transfer all of the scouts over with this new transfer guru guy, I guess it is difficult. It's difficult to recreate that environment, because what you're probably doing is bottling lightning. And it's very, very difficult to go somewhere else and bottle lightning again. So, I don't think he's been here long enough for us to really judge his scouting, as it were. And we're not really clear on which. Well, some of the players obviously came from his Rolodex because of where they came from, but we're not clear enough on that. But what's more important than hiring, like, let's get the best guy at this and the best guy at this and the best guy at contracts, the guy with the best contacts, and the guy who's uncovered, whose team of scouts has uncovered all these players. What's more important is getting people who mesh, getting people who can work together. And I understood it all on paper. On paper, it all looked great, but I think there is this danger of falling into guru thinking and just thinking, if we get this guy, he'll do everything he did at the last place he was at, and that will be that. And there are countless examples of this. Comely, Arneson, Baldini, all of these people have landed these big jobs and not been able to do it. So there's that, but I think the main problem for Arsenal is obviously that there was just something behind the scenes that didn't fit, and that happens, and maybe we just had a couple of we had some big egos competing there. It would be my read of it.
I know what that's like, and I know how hard it is to manage, so I totally understand where you're coming from. Look, I mean, some of it's survivorship bias too, right? Like, if you get a Ousmane Dembele for $1 million and sell him for $100 million, no matter what else you do, you're halfway on your way to being considered a guru. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because you're going to get things wrong in the transfer market, and people accept that. So if you get it right a couple of times, it's survivorship bias. You're known as a guru for the successes. So, Clive, you already got to do a Svenpocalypse pod. I don't want to get your take on this much more, because I think we handled it pretty authoritatively, I would say, comprehensively. But I'll ask you just about the rumor. I mean, there's some good reporting out there saying that it might be Monchi. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, well, he's one of the ones I actually do know a little bit about, and I think sometimes we're getting so sort of anal about information as fans now. We start to know these people, right? We know who they are, and we judge them. But I suppose Tim's point about meshing is the key one, and the reason why he sort of is quite exciting is, one, he's good. He's got a reputation for being good. But two, he knows the manager and he's worked with the manager, right? And so if we're looking for, a couple of weeks ago, a week or so ago, I was devastated about the Sven, what's happened there, because we know we need that person in our minds to get those mad for a penalty to 2 million, because we know we've blown millions over the last 3 or 4 years, right? So we know our recovery based on our moves in the transfer market, both recruiting and selling, and so we put that all on Sven's shoulders, right? So the fact he was going was devastating, but actually when you look at it, if you're not working well with your workmates, or not working at all, what we've heard about, and just blagging a living, then basically it doesn't really matter what we think. It's about that whole thing working. And if you think back to the last few years, I don't want to keep looking back, but you've got to. There are a lot of people quite comfortable in their jobs at Arsenal, hence the whole restructuring, hence tens and tens of people that have left. I'd much rather people leave because they're not doing a job than stay around because it's an easy job and a comfortable environment. So he's gone, we move on. And the whole Monchi idea, if it's going to happen, suddenly it's sunny again, right? And that could really be good. And I think the sort of club he's come from, that Sevilla, that sort of Dortmund level type club, is, I think, the identity Arsenal want to be. I think we need to develop an identity of being an intelligent, well-run football club again. Because I don't think that's what we are at the moment. I think we're heading towards that direction. Over the last few years, I think it's been a bit of a laughing stock, how we're being run. And my hope is, we talk about identity and playing identities. I just want us to be smart. I want us to be the best Arsenal we can be. Smart decisions, smart selling, smart buying, bringing young players through, having the eye for talent, knowing when to sell that talent, knowing when to get the next one in. Be a smart club. Don't be a stupid club that's overspending because you've got increased revenues and you thought the revenues would last forever. The Champions League money's gone. Everyone's redoing all the club levels. And we're sitting there congratulating ourselves on our big revenue. We're actually not doing our job. We're not doing our job putting the best football team on the pitch, and we got off that. And now we're getting back on it, right? And it's going to be great to watch this develop. And I hope that one works out, that rumour works out. But for me, Elliot, I just want to be a smarter, intelligent football club. And then we start to see the identity on the pitch come after that, because we will attract whoever we want to attract. When you're sensible, you attract managers, you attract players. They don't go to Dortmund. They don't go to Dortmund. They come to Arsenal instead, because we were looking at Dembele, we were looking at Aubameyang when they both chose that path, and they wouldn't come to us because we weren't ready for them. We weren't in the best shape. They went somewhere else, and that club has made money off the back of them. So I want that to change. I want us to be the club these players come to, and then we'll start to see a better team on the pitch.
I don't want to read too much into what you said, but you said if we're a smarter club, then the managers will start to come to Arsenal. So I can only assume that means you're Emery out. You heard it here first, everyone. Clive, not behind the manager. Look, we're going to leave it there. We've got a big FA Cup game coming up on Friday. Tim, are we getting a match preview video for that?
Yes.
Awesome. So over on Patreon, you will see Tim with a video previewing the FA Cup final. FA Cup final. Wouldn't that be nice? FA Cup game tie. There you go. Against Manchester United. Then it's Cardiff next week. We'll have pods after all of that and an additional Patreon pod coming up. So that is all coming up. Tim is on Twitter at Stoberto. Thank you, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thank you, Clive.
Emery in.
Yeah, whatever. You said it. You can't backtrack. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Give us a 5-star review. Write nasty things about us in the comments. Paul will be back for the next one. Scott will be back shortly. I'll be back home, so my audio will be normal. We love you and appreciate you, and we look forward to speaking to you after Arsenal 10, Manchester United 0.